The sun cast a golden glow across the dusty streets of Willow Creek, Texas, as Sophia Bennett clutched her shawl tightly around her shoulders, her footsteps echoing against the hard-packed dirt. The year was 1875, and the town was slowly transforming from a lawless frontier outpost to something resembling civilization, though danger still lurked in the shadows. Sophia's auburn hair fluttered in the evening breeze as she quickened her pace. She had stayed too long at the schoolhouse, preparing lessons for her students, and now faced the long walk home with the sun rapidly descending toward the distant mountains. Her heart raced with each sound that broke the silence, a tumbleweed rolling across her path, the distant howl of a coyote, the creak of a windmill turning in the breeze. "Madam, you shouldn't be walking these parts alone," a deep voice called from behind her. Sophia spun around, her hand instinctively reaching for the small Derringer pistol hidden in her pocket, a necessary precaution for a woman living alone in the West. A tall figure on horseback approached, silhouetted against the setting sun. As he drew closer, she could make out his features, a strong jawline covered with a few days' worth of stubble, piercing blue eyes beneath the brim of a worn Stetson, and broad shoulders that spoke of a life of hard labor. "I'm quite capable of taking care of myself, sir," Sophia replied, her voice steadier than she felt. The stranger dismounted with the fluid grace of someone who had spent his life in the saddle. "I don't doubt that, madam," he said, tipping his hat respectfully. "But these are dangerous times, and Comancheros have been spotted in these parts." He kept a respectful distance, leading his chestnut mare. "Name's Henry Blackwood. I'd be honored to see you safely home." "I appreciate your concern, Mr. Blackwood, but The distant sound of riders approaching cut her off. Henry's expression hardened as he scanned the horizon. "Please, Mississippi Bennett." "Sophia Bennett," she replied, suddenly grateful for his presence. "Miss Bennett, I'll walk with you until the sun rises if that's what it takes to see you safely home." His voice was gentle but firm, leaving no room for argument. Sophia hesitated, years of independence warring with the undeniable wisdom of accepting his help. The riders were getting closer. "Very well, Mr. Blackwood. I live at the old Miller place, about a mile past the creek." Henry nodded, taking the reins of his horse. "Then we'd best get moving." As they walked side by side in the fading light, Sophia studied her unexpected companion from the corner of her eye. His clothes were trail-worn but clean denims, a faded blue shirt, and a leather vest that had seen better days. A Colt revolver hung at his hip, and she noticed calluses on his hands that spoke of hard work. "You're new to Willow Creek," she observed, breaking the silence between them. "Just passing through," Henry replied, his eyes constantly scanning their surroundings. "Been working cattle drives up from San Antonio. Thought I might find work at one of the ranches around here." "The Double R is hiring hands," Sophia offered. "Mr. Richardson lost 2 men last month to the silver fever in Colorado." Henry nodded appreciatively. "Much obliged for the information. And you, Miss Bennett?" "You mentioned lessons. Are you the schoolteacher?" "For 3 years now," she confirmed. "I came west from Boston after the war. My father and brother didn't return from Gettysburg, and there was nothing left for me there." A shadow passed over Henry's face. "The war took many good men. I was just a boy when it ended, but I remember the men coming home, those who did, anyway." They crossed the small wooden bridge that spanned Willow Creek, the water below sparkling in the last rays of sunlight. The tension in Sophia's shoulders began to ease as they left the open plains behind and approached the more settled area where her small house stood. "Do you have family waiting for you somewhere, Mr. Blackwood?" she asked, curiosity getting the better of her. Henry's expression remained neutral, but something flickered in his eyes. "No, madam. Haven't had family since I was 16. The trail's been my home since then." Before Sophia could respond, the sound of galloping horses erupted behind them. Henry reacted instantly, pulling Sophia and his horse behind a cluster of cottonwood trees. "Stay down," he whispered, drawing his revolver. 5 riders thundered past on the main trail, their faces obscured by bandanas, rifles glinting in the dying light. They were heading toward town, and the purpose in their posture sent a chill down Sophia's spine. "Bank robbers?" she whispered once they had passed. Henry holstered his weapon with a grim expression. "Or worse. We should hurry." The rest of their journey passed in tense silence until the outline of Sophia's modest home appeared in the distance. It was a small but well-maintained cabin with a porch that wrapped around one side, a vegetable garden to the rear, and a small barn where she kept a milk cow and a few chickens. "This is it," she said, relief evident in her voice. "Thank you for your escort, Mr. Blackwood." Henry surveyed the property with a professional eye. "You live here alone?" "I do," Sophia answered, lifting her chin slightly. "I can manage quite well." "I don't doubt it, Miss Bennett," he said with a hint of admiration. "But those riders concern me. Would you object if I made sure everything is secure before I leave?" The prudent part of Sophia wanted to decline inviting a stranger near her home went against everything her father had taught her about self-preservation. But something in Henry's direct gaze spoke of honesty, and the memory of those riders was still fresh in her mind. "I would appreciate that," she conceded. Henry checked the barn and the perimeter of the house while Sophia lit the lamps inside. When he returned to the porch, the full darkness of night had settled over the land. "Everything seems in order," he reported. "But I'd feel better if you'd permit me to camp nearby tonight. Just as a precaution." Sophia hesitated at her doorway. "That hardly seems necessary, Mr. Blackwood." "Perhaps not," he acknowledged. "But I gave my word to see you safely home, and I can't in good conscience ride away with those men still in the area." The sincerity in his voice moved her. "There's a hayloft in the barn. It's not much, but you're welcome to it for the night. And I insist you join me for supper. It's the least I can offer in return for your kindness." A genuine smile transformed Henry's face, revealing a dimple in his right cheek. "That's mighty generous of you, Miss Bennett. I accept with gratitude." Sophia prepared a simple but hearty meal of bean stew, cornbread, and coffee. As they sat at her small table, the initial awkwardness between them gradually gave way to comfortable conversation. Henry spoke of his travels across the territories, of cattle drives and the changing West, while Sophia shared stories of her students and the challenges of bringing education to a frontier town. "Most folks around here see book learning as something of a luxury," she explained, pouring more coffee into his cup. "But I believe it's essential, especially now that the frontier is closing. The children of today will build the towns of tomorrow." Henry nodded thoughtfully. "My own schooling was limited to what my mother could teach me before she passed. I've often wished I'd had more opportunity for learning." "It's never too late," Sophia said impulsively. "I have plenty of books you'd be welcome to borrow." A knock at the door interrupted their conversation. Henry's hand moved instinctively toward his holster as he rose, positioning himself between Sophia and the door. "Who is it?" Sophia called out, reaching for the shotgun she kept by the fireplace. "It's Sheriff Davis, Miss Bennett. Need a word with you." Sophia nodded to Henry, who stepped aside but remained alert as she opened the door. Sheriff Davis stood on her porch, his weathered face grim in the lamplight. His eyes narrowed at the sight of Henry. "Evening, Miss Bennett. Didn't realize you had company." "This is Mr. Blackwood," Sophia explained. "He was kind enough to escort me home when he saw me walking alone at sunset." The sheriff nodded curtly. "Wise precaution. We've had reports of the Parker gang in the area. They hit the Double R Ranch this afternoon, killed a hand who tried to stop them, and made off with the payroll." He shifted his attention to Henry. "Don't believe I've seen you around these parts before, mister." "Just arrived today," Henry confirmed. "Planning to look for work at the ranches." The sheriff studied him for a moment longer. "Well, Miss Bennett, I'm checking on all the outlying homes. Lock your doors tonight, and keep that shotgun handy. Those boys are desperate and dangerous." "Thank you for the warning, Sheriff," Sophia replied. "We'll be careful." After the sheriff departed, A heavy silence fell between them. The news of violence so close to her home shook Sophia more than she wanted to admit. "I should check on my horse," Henry said quietly, moving toward the door. "Mr. Blackwood," Sophia called after him. "Thank you again for your escort this evening. It seems your concern was well-founded." He paused at the door, his expression solemn. "Get some rest, Miss Bennett. I'll keep watch tonight." As Sophia prepared for bed, she found herself thinking about the mysterious Cowboy who had appeared in her life like something from a dime novel. There was depth to him that intrigued her, an education in his speech that belied his rough exterior, and a gentleness that contrasted with his obvious capability for violence if needed. She blew out her bedside lamp and lay in the darkness, listening to the night sounds of the prairie and now, the occasional soft footsteps of Henry Blackwood as he patrolled the perimeter of her property. Despite the danger that lurked in the night, Sophia felt safer than she had in years. Morning arrived with a pale pink glow on the horizon. Sophia rose early, as was her habit, and was surprised to find Henry already awake, tending to his horse outside the barn. "Good morning," she called, carrying a pot of fresh coffee and 2 tin cups. "I thought you might appreciate this." Henry's face was tired but alert, suggesting he had spent much of the night keeping watch. "Thank you kindly," he said, accepting the steaming cup with gratitude. They stood in comfortable silence, watching the sun climb slowly into the sky, burning away the morning mist that clung to the tall grass surrounding her property. "No sign of trouble in the night," Henry reported, sipping his coffee. "Sheriff passed by once around midnight." "You didn't sleep at all, did you?" Sophia asked. Henry shrugged. "Caught a few hours toward dawn. I'm used to night watches on the trail." Sophia studied him in the clear morning light. There was something about him that didn't quite fit the typical cowboy mold of refinement beneath the rugged exterior that piqued her curiosity. "I need to head into town for supplies today," she said, "and to check on the schoolhouse. After last night's news, I'm concerned about my students." Henry nodded. "I'll accompany you, if you don't mind. I should speak with Mr. Richardson about that work you mentioned." They set out after breakfast, Henry on horseback and Sophia driving her small wagon pulled by an elderly but reliable mare named Daisy. The morning was pleasant, with a gentle breeze carrying the scent of wildflowers across the prairie. As they approached town, signs of the previous day's trouble became evident. A group of men gathered outside the bank, their expressions grim as they examined fresh bullet holes in the wooden facade. Sheriff Davis was among them, deep in conversation with a man Sophia recognized as the bank manager. Henry dismounted and helped Sophia down from her wagon. "Stay close," he murmured, his eyes scanning the street. They approached the sheriff, who acknowledged them with a tired nod. "Miss Bennett." "Mr. Blackwood. Town had some excitement after I left you last night. Parker gang tried to rob the bank, but Mr. Peterson here had already moved most of the cash to the new safe." "Anyone hurt?" Sophia asked, concerned. "Doc Simmons is patching up. Young Billy from the livery caught a stray bullet in the shoulder. He'll mend." The sheriff's eyes narrowed as he studied Henry. "You have experience with a gun, Blackwood?" Henry maintained a neutral expression. "Some. Why do you ask?" "Forming a posse to go after the Parker gang. They've hit 3 towns in the territory this month. Governor's offering a reward." "I appreciate the offer, Sheriff, but I'm looking for honest work, not bounty hunting," Henry replied. The sheriff seemed to assess Henry for a moment longer before nodding. "Fair enough. R's still looking for hands, if that's what you're after. Old man Richardson is at the saloon, drowning his sorrows over yesterday's loss." As they continued down the main street, Sophia noticed how the townspeople regarded Henry with a mixture of curiosity and suspicion. Newcomers were always subject to scrutiny in small frontier towns, especially tall, armed strangers who appeared during troubled times. "The Mercantile is just ahead," Sophia said, pointing to a 2-story building with a wide porch. "I need to purchase supplies for the schoolhouse." Inside the Mercantile, they were greeted by Mrs. Holbrook, a plump woman with kind eyes who had become one of Sophia's few friends in Willow Creek. "Sophia, dear! We were so worried when we heard about the trouble. Sheriff Davis said he checked on you." Her curious gaze shifted to Henry, who stood respectfully by the door. "Mrs. Holbrook, this is Mr. Blackwood. He was kind enough to escort me home yesterday evening." "Pleasure, madam," Henry said, tipping his hat. Mrs. Holbrook beamed. "Any gentleman looking out for our teacher is welcome in my store. What can I help you with today?" While Sophia selected school supplies, Henry browsed the shelves, eventually selecting a small book of poetry. When he approached the counter to pay, Sophia couldn't hide her surprise. "Wordsworth?" she inquired, noting his selection. A hint of color touched Henry's cheeks. "My mother was fond of his work. Reminds me of her." This small revelation only deepened Sophia's curiosity about the enigmatic Cowboy. As they left the mercantile, loaded with supplies, they encountered a group of children running toward the schoolhouse. "Miss Bennett!" a small girl with pigtails called out. "Are you coming to school today? Ma said you might not on account of the bad men." Sophia knelt to meet the child's gaze. "Of course I am, Lucy. Education doesn't stop for outlaws. Run along now, and tell the others I'll be there shortly." As the children scampered away, Henry watched them with an expression Sophia couldn't quite decipher. "You're good with them," he observed. "They're the future of this place," she replied simply. "Some have never known anything but this frontier life. I want to show them there's a wider world beyond these plains." They walked toward the schoolhouse, a modest building at the edge of town. Inside, Sophia moved about the single room with practiced efficiency, preparing the day's lessons on the chalkboard, while Henry helped arrange the desks that had been pushed aside for cleaning. "Will you look for work at the Double R today?" Sophia asked as they finished. Henry nodded. "If Mr. Richardson is hiring, I'd be grateful for the opportunity. The ranch is about 5 miles north of my property," Sophia explained. "Many of my students are the children of ranch hands. It's good, honest work." A commotion outside drew their attention. Through the window, they could see Sheriff Davis and several armed men on horseback gathered in the street. The posse was forming to pursue the Parker gang. "Should be leaving soon," Henry noted, watching the men prepare. "With luck, they'll bring those outlaws to justice before they can cause more harm." Children began arriving for the school day, their excited chatter filling the room as they stared curiously at Henry. Sophia introduced him simply as a friend who had helped her with preparations, not wanting to fuel the town's inevitable gossip. "I should take my leave," Henry said quietly. "Thank you for your hospitality, Miss Bennett. Will I see you again?" The question escaped before Sophia could consider its propriety. Henry's expression softened. "If Mr. Richardson hires me, I expect our paths will cross regularly. The Double R hands often come to town on Saturdays. Then I wish you good fortune, Mr. Blackwood." As Henry departed, Sophia watched him mount his horse and ride toward the saloon where Mr. Richardson was reportedly drowning his sorrows. There was something about Henry Blackwood that had captured her interest in a way no man had since she'd come west. Perhaps it was his quiet strength, or the glimpses of depth beneath his cowboy exterior. Whatever it was, Sophia found herself hoping that the Double R would indeed have work for him. The school day passed with the usual challenges of teaching children of various ages and abilities in a single room. By the time the last student departed, the sun was already beginning its descent toward the horizon. Sophia gathered her things, mindful of the need to reach home before dark after yesterday's events. As she locked the schoolhouse door, she was surprised to see Henry approaching on horseback. "Mr. Blackwood," she greeted him, unable to hide her pleasure at seeing him again. "How did you fare with Mr. Richardson?" Henry dismounted, a satisfied expression on his face. "I start tomorrow. Mr. Richardson was impressed enough with my references to offer me the position of foreman, seeing as his last one was the man killed in yesterday's robbery." "Foreman? That's wonderful!" Sophia exclaimed. Though I'm sorry for the circumstances that created the opening. As am I, Henry agreed solemnly. I've written for several outfits, but this will be my first time managing men. He hesitated before continuing. I thought you might appreciate an escort home again, considering recent events. Sophia found herself smiling. I would indeed. Thank you. They traveled the road to Sophia's house in companionable conversation, with Henry sharing what he had learned about the Double R and the surrounding area. The ranch was one of the largest in the territory, with over 5,000 head of cattle and 20 hands working under the foreman. Mr. Richardson is getting on in years, Henry explained. His son was supposed to take over the operation, but he was killed in a stampede 2 years ago. The old man doesn't have the energy to oversee everything himself anymore. It's a significant responsibility, Sophia observed. He must see something special in you to offer such a position to a newcomer. Henry looked slightly uncomfortable with the praise. I've been working cattle since I was a boy. It's in my blood, I suppose. As they approached Sophia's property, the setting sun painted the prairie in hues of gold and amber. The sight reminded Sophia of their first meeting just 24 hours earlier, a chance encounter that already felt like the beginning of something significant. Will you stay for supper again? She asked as they reached her gate. I have a stew that's been simmering all day. Henry hesitated only briefly. I'd be honored, Miss Bennett. Though I should leave for the ranch afterward. Mr. Richardson expects me at first light. Inside, Sophia busied herself with final preparations for the meal, while Henry tended to his horse. The domestic scene felt surprisingly natural, despite the brevity of their acquaintance. When they sat down to eat, Sophia found herself eager to learn more about the man across from her. You mentioned yesterday that you haven't had family since you were 16, she ventured. May I ask what happened? Henry's expression grew distant. My mother died of fever when I was 12. My father and I worked a small ranch in the Texas Hill Country. 4 years later, rustlers came. Pa tried to stop them. He didn't need to finish the sentence. I'm so sorry, Sophia said softly. I buried him on our land, sold what was left, and headed west with nothing but his horse and gun. Henry's voice was matter-of-fact, but Sophia could sense the pain beneath the words. Been working other men's cattle ever since. And the poetry? Sophia asked gently. Your mother's influence? A shadow of a smile crossed Henry's face. She was a schoolteacher before she married Pa. Always had books around, even in our small cabin. She believed education was as essential as breathing. His eyes met Sophia's. She would have approved of what you're doing here. The personal connection between them seemed to strengthen with each revealed piece of history. As the evening progressed, their conversation flowed easily from past to present, touching on their hopes for the future. Henry spoke of his dream to someday have his own small ranch, while Sophia shared her vision for expanding the school as the town grew. All too soon, it was time for Henry to depart for the Double R. As they stood on the porch saying their goodbyes, an awkward moment stretched between them, two people who had formed a connection neither had anticipated, unsure of the proper way to acknowledge it. The ranch isn't far, Henry said finally. Perhaps I could call on you again, if you wouldn't mind the company. Sophia felt a warmth spread through her that had nothing to do with the mild spring evening. I would like that very much, Mr. Blackwood. Henry, please, he said, his voice softer than she had yet heard it. At least when it's just the two of us. Henry, she repeated, testing the name. And you must call me Sophia. He tipped his hat, a gesture that was becoming endearingly familiar. Good night, Sophia. Lock your door behind me. As Sophia watched him ride away, she was struck by how quickly her life had changed. Just 2 days ago, she had been the solitary schoolteacher, focused solely on her students and her own quiet existence. Now, her thoughts were filled with a blue-eyed cowboy who read poetry and walked beside her at sunset. For the first time in years, Sophia felt the stirring of something she had thought long buried, hope for a future that included more than just her books and her schoolhouse. It was a dangerous feeling, she knew. The West was unkind to dreams and dreamers. But as she closed and locked her door, Sophia couldn't help but wonder if perhaps this time, the dream might take root and grow. The next several weeks established a rhythm to their relationship. Henry settled into his role as foreman at the R, earning the respect of the ranch hands through his fair treatment and hard work. True to his word, he found reasons to ride by Sophia's property several times a week, often bringing small gifts, a book he thought she might enjoy, fresh vegetables from the ranch garden, or wild flowers gathered from the prairie. Saturdays became Sophia's favorite day, as Henry would escort her to town for supplies and then join her for supper. The townspeople quickly took notice of their growing friendship, and gossip spread with the efficiency that only small towns can manage. Mrs. Holbrook at the Mercantile was particularly interested, taking every opportunity to mention what a fine couple they made. "Pay her no mind," Sophia told Henry one Saturday as they left the store, Mrs. Holbrook's knowing smile following them out the door. "Small towns thrive on speculation. Does it bother you?" Henry asked, his expression concerned. "The talk, I mean." Sophia considered the question. "Not particularly. Unless it bothers you? I only worry it might damage your standing as the schoolteacher," he admitted. "I know how important propriety is in your position." His consideration touched her. "The school board knows I'm a woman of good character. Besides, you've become quite respected in Willow Creek yourself, Mr. Foreman." It was true. Henry had proven himself not only at the ranch, but in town as well. When the Reverend needed help rebuilding the church roof, Henry had organized the ranch hands to assist. When young Billy from the livery struggled after his injury, Henry found him work at the R that he could manage with one arm while his shoulder healed. Spring gave way to summer, bringing long, hot days and brief, precious evenings when they could enjoy each other's company. On one such evening in late June, they sat on Sophia's porch watching fireflies dance above the tall grass. Henry had brought a guitar from the ranch and was playing a gentle melody while Sophia mended a shirt by the light of a hurricane lamp. "My father used to play in the evenings," Sophia remarked, her needle moving rhythmically through the fabric. "Nothing fancy, just old songs from back east. I'd forgotten how much I missed the sound." Henry's fingers continued to move across the strings. "Music was scarce where I grew up. But there was an old Mexican vaquero who worked for my father Manuel. He taught me a few songs when we'd be out watching the herd at night. It's beautiful," Sophia said softly. Henry's playing trailed off, and he set the guitar aside. "Sophia," he began, his voice uncharacteristically hesitant. "There's something I've been meaning to speak with you about." The seriousness in his tone made Sophia set aside her mending. "What is it?" "Mr. Richardson called me into his office yesterday. He's been impressed with the work I've done at the R, and he's offered to sell me a parcel of land. 500 acres on the northeast corner of his property, including a small cabin that was used by line riders." Sophia's heart quickened. "Henry, that's wonderful. Your own ranch, it's what you've always wanted." "It's not much," he cautioned. "The cabin needs work, and I'd be starting with just a small herd. But it's good land with a year-round spring. I could build something there, over time." "I have no doubt you could," Sophia said warmly. "When would you start?" Henry met her gaze directly. "That depends on you." "On me?" Sophia's voice faltered as the implication of his words registered. Setting aside the guitar, Henry moved to kneel before her chair. "Sophia Bennett, I know we've only known each other for a few months, but I've never been more certain of anything in my life. I love you. I think I've loved you since that first evening when you stood your ground against a stranger on a lonely road." Sophia felt tears spring to her eyes as Henry continued. "I'm not a wealthy man, and the life I'm offering wouldn't be easy. But if you'd consider becoming my wife, I swear I'd spend every day trying to make you happy." Time seemed to stand still as Sophia looked into the eyes of the man who had walked into her life so unexpectedly. In them, she saw everything she had ever wanted: strength, kindness, integrity, And love. So much love. Yes, she whispered, her voice thick with emotion. Yes, Henry Blackwood, I will marry you. Joy transformed Henry's face as he rose and gently pulled Sophia to her feet. His hands were trembling slightly as he cupped her face. May I? Sophia nodded, and Henry lowered his lips to hers in a kiss that was both tender and filled with promise. When they finally parted, both were smiling through tears. I never thought I'd find this, Henry confessed, his forehead resting against hers. Not out here, not after everything. Nor I, Sophia agreed. But perhaps that's why we recognized it in each other when it came. They spent the remainder of the evening making plans for their future. Henry would begin work on the cabin immediately, making it suitable for a schoolteacher's standards. They would marry in the fall, after the big cattle drive to Kansas was complete. Sophia would continue teaching, riding to the schoolhouse from their new home. When Henry finally departed that night, Sophia stood on her porch long after his figure had disappeared into the darkness. The stars seemed brighter somehow, the night air sweeter. For the first time since leaving Boston, she felt truly at home in this wild, beautiful land. The news of their engagement spread quickly through Willow Creek. Most reactions were positive. The schoolteacher and the respected ranch foreman made a sensible match in the eyes of the community. The school board expressed concerns about Sophia continuing to teach after marriage, but with qualified teachers being scarce on the frontier, they reluctantly agreed to let her maintain her position. Summer progressed with both Sophia and Henry working diligently toward their autumn wedding. Every spare moment Henry had was devoted to improving the cabin on his newly purchased land. Sophia visited whenever possible, helping to plant a small garden and offering opinions on the improvements. The cabin itself was small but solidly built, with 2 rooms downstairs and a loft above. Henry added a proper stone fireplace, replaced the dirt floor with wooden planking, and constructed a covered porch across the front. With each improvement, the structure transformed from a line rider's shelter into a home. On a warm August evening, Henry brought Sophia to see his latest edition bookshelves built into one wall of what would be their main room. For your library, he explained as she ran her fingers along the smooth wood. I know how important your books are to you. Sophia turned to him, overwhelmed by the thoughtfulness of the gesture. It's perfect, Henry. Absolutely perfect. They stood in the center of what would soon be their home, arms around each other, imagining the life they would build together. It was a moment of pure contentment, unmarred by the hardships that had brought them both to this place and time. That contentment was shattered 3 days later when Henry rode hard into Willow Creek, his face grim as he dismounted in front of the schoolhouse. Sophia was just dismissing her students for the day when she saw him through the window, his urgent posture instantly alarming her. Henry? What's happened? She asked as she met him at the door. The Parker gang, he said grimly. They've been spotted heading this way. Sheriff Davis believes they're planning to hit the bank again. There's a large payroll being delivered for the railroad workers. Fear gripped Sophia's heart. When? Tonight, most likely. The sheriff's gathering men to defend the town. Henry's eyes were troubled as he took her hands in his. I need you to go home and stay there, Sophia. Keep your shotgun close. But you. I've given my word to help defend the town, he said firmly. Most of the ranch hands are still out on the range. There aren't enough men otherwise. Sophia wanted to protest but knew it would be futile. Henry's sense of duty was one of the qualities she loved most about him, even when it placed him in danger. Promise me you'll be careful, she pleaded. Henry's expression softened. I promise. Now please go home and stay safe. I couldn't bear it if anything happened to you. With a quick kiss, they parted Sophia to her wagon and Henry toward the sheriff's office. As she drove home, Sophia's mind was filled with terrible scenarios. The Parker gang was known for its brutality. The thought of Henry facing such men made her stomach clench with fear. At home, Sophia found herself unable to sit still. She checked and rechecked her shotgun, barred the doors and windows, and paced the floor as darkness fell. The distant sound of hoofbeats sent her heart racing more than once, but each time it proved to be nothing more than her imagination or a passing animal. Around midnight, the unmistakable sound of gunfire echoed from the direction of town. Sophia rushed to her window, straining to see through the darkness. A faint orange glow on the horizon suggested fire, a terrible prospect for a town built primarily of wood. Hours passed with no news and no sign of Henry. Sophia maintained her vigil by the window, praying for his safety and the protection of the townspeople she had come to care for. As dawn approached, exhaustion overcame her, and she dozed fitfully in her chair, the shotgun across her lap. The sound of horses approaching jerked her awake. Gripping the shotgun, Sophia moved cautiously to the window. Relief flooded through her at the sight of Henry riding toward the house, accompanied by Sheriff Davis. Both men looked exhausted, with soot staining their clothes and faces, but they were alive. Sophia flung open the door and ran to meet them. "Thank God you're safe!" Henry dismounted stiffly, wincing slightly as his right boot hit the ground. It was then that Sophia noticed the blood-soaked bandage wrapped around his thigh. "It's just a graze," he assured her, seeing her alarm. "Doc Simmons already tended to it." Sheriff Davis nodded in confirmation. "Your fiancé fought like a man possessed, Miss Bennett. Took down 2 of the Parker boys himself." "What happened in town?" Sophia asked, helping Henry to the porch. "They hit the bank as expected," the sheriff explained. "But we were ready for them. There was a firefight. They set fire to the livery trying to create a distraction, but we managed to contain it." "Casualties?" Sophia dreaded the answer. 2 townsmen wounded, Cooper from the bank and young Mason from the freight office. "They'll recover." The sheriff's expression darkened. "We lost Deputy Williams. He was married just last month." Sophia closed her eyes briefly in sorrow. "And the gang?" 3 dead, including Jim Parker himself. 2 escaped, but they're being pursued by a posse from the county seat." The sheriff sighed heavily. "I should get back. Just wanted to see Blackwood safely to your door. He refused to let Doc Simmons keep him in town for observation." After the sheriff departed, Sophia helped Henry inside and insisted on examining his wound herself. The bullet had indeed merely grazed his outer thigh, but the wound was deep enough to cause concern. "You should have stayed with the doctor," she chided gently as she cleaned and rebandaged the injury. "I needed to see you," Henry replied, his voice husky with emotion. "When those bullets were flying, all I could think about was you, how I needed to survive to come back to you." Sophia's hands stilled as she looked up at him, seeing the intensity in his eyes. "I was so afraid," she admitted. "When I heard the gunfire, I thought—" "I made you a promise," Henry reminded her, reaching out to touch her cheek. "I intend to keep every promise I ever make to you, Sophia Bennett." In that moment, with the sunrise streaming through her windows and the man she loved safely returned to her despite the dangers they had faced, Sophia felt a profound certainty about their future together. Life on the frontier would never be without risk, but facing those risks together made them bearable. The weeks following the bank robbery attempt brought significant changes to Willow Creek. The death of Deputy Williams cast a pall over the town, but there was also a sense of relief that the Parker gang no longer posed a threat. Henry's role in defending the town elevated his standing in the community even further, and Mr. Richardson, impressed by his foreman's courage, offered Henry a small herd of cattle at a reduced price to start his ranch. By mid-September, Henry's leg had healed completely, and preparations for their wedding were well underway. The ceremony was to be held in the newly repaired church, with a celebration afterward at the schoolhouse. Mrs. Holbrook had taken charge of organizing the women of the town to prepare food and decorations, turning what might have been a simple frontier wedding into something approaching the celebrations Sophia remembered from her Eastern upbringing. "I fear Mrs. Holbrook may be getting carried away," Sophia confessed to Henry as they rode back from inspecting the progress on their cabin. "She's ordered special fabric from Denver for the bunting." Henry chuckled. "Let her enjoy herself. From what I gather, Willow Creek hasn't had much to celebrate lately." A wedding is good for everyone's spirits. The day before their wedding arrived with clear skies and a crisp autumn breeze, perfect weather for the harvest celebration that would coincide with their nuptials. Sophia spent the morning at the schoolhouse, helping to decorate while Henry made a final trip to their new home to ensure everything was ready for their return after a brief wedding trip to Denver. That evening, following tradition, they spent apart, Sophia at her house with Mrs. Holbrook and several other women who insisted on keeping the bride company, and Henry at the ranch bunkhouse where the hands threw him a rowdy but good-natured celebration. Dawn broke on their wedding day with a spectacular sunrise that painted the sky in shades of pink and gold. Sophia stood at her window, watching the colors spread across the prairie, feeling a profound sense of rightness about the path her life had taken. From the grief of losing her family in the war to the uncertainty of heading west alone, every step had led her to this day to Henry. Mrs. Holbrook arrived early, bringing with her Sophia's wedding dress, a creation of ivory silk that had been ordered from St. Louis months ago for the storekeeper's own daughter, who had eloped instead with a traveling salesman. With a few alterations, it fits Sophia perfectly, the simple lines and delicate lace trims suiting her slender frame. "You look absolutely beautiful," Mrs. Holbrook declared, tears in her eyes as she adjusted the small wreath of autumn flowers that crowned Sophia's upswept hair. "That young man won't know what hit him." By noon, the entire town had gathered at the church. Sophia waited in a small anteroom, her heart racing with anticipation rather than nerves. Through the door, she could hear the murmur of voices and the occasional laugh as the community assembled to witness the union of their schoolteacher and the respected rancher she had chosen. Sheriff Davis had offered to escort her down the aisle in place of her father, an honor Sophia had gratefully accepted. When he appeared at the anteroom door in his best suit, his badge polished to a high shine, Sophia felt a surge of affection for this town and its people who had become her family. "Ready, Miss Bennett?" the sheriff asked, offering his arm. "For the last time I'll call you that." Sophia smiled, taking a deep breath. "I've been ready since the day he walked beside me at sunset, Sheriff." The small church fell silent as the doors opened. Sophia's eyes immediately found Henry, standing tall and handsome at the altar in a new black suit, his blue eyes fixed on her with an expression of such love and wonder that it nearly took her breath away. The ceremony itself was simple and heartfelt. They exchanged traditional vows, their voices clear and certain as they promised to love and cherish one another through whatever life might bring. When the Reverend pronounced them husband and wife, Henry's kiss was gentle but filled with promise, drawing good-natured cheers from the assembled townspeople. The celebration that followed lasted well into the evening. Tables groaned with food, a fiddle player and guitarist provided music for dancing, and the schoolhouse was transformed by lanterns and Mrs. Holbrook's bunting into a festive hall. Children played games in the schoolyard while their parents enjoyed the rare opportunity for socializing and merriment. As the sun began to set, Henry found Sophia sitting on the schoolhouse steps, taking a moment's respite from the festivities. "May I join you, Mrs. Blackwood?" he asked, his smile warming her to her core. "I believe that's your right, Mr. Blackwood," she replied, making room for him beside her. They sat in companionable silence, watching the sunset paint the sky in hues reminiscent of the evening they had first met. "Do you remember what I said to you that first night?" Henry asked, taking her hand in his. Sophia smiled. "You said you'd walk with me until the sun rises?" "I meant it then as a promise of protection," Henry said thoughtfully. "But now I see it differently. It's a promise for our life together that no matter what darkness comes, we'll walk through it side by side until the light returns." Sophia leaned her head against his shoulder, overcome with emotion at the simple poetry of his words. "I love you, Henry Blackwood. And I love you, Sophia Blackwood. Now and always." As the first stars appeared in the darkening sky, they rejoined their celebration, surrounded by the community that had witnessed the beginning of their journey together. Tomorrow they would leave for Denver, and upon their return, they would begin their life in the small cabin that Henry had transformed into a home. There would be challenges ahead: the harsh winters of the territory, the unpredictable nature of ranching, the continuing demands of Sophia's teaching, but in this moment, the future stretched before them full of promise and possibility. 5 years passed, bringing both joy and hardship to the Blackwoods' lives on the frontier. Their small ranch, which they named Sunset Creek, prospered under Henry's careful management. What began as a modest herd of 50 cattle grew to over 500, and the original cabin expanded to include 2 additional rooms and a proper kitchen. Sophia continued teaching at the Willow Creek school for 2 years after their marriage, until the birth of their first child, a daughter they named Hannah after Henry's mother. 18 months later, their son Samuel joined the family, named for Sophia's father. With 2 young children at home, Sophia reluctantly resigned her teaching position, though she continued to tutor older students who sought additional education beyond what the new schoolteacher could provide. Willow Creek itself grew and changed with the times. The arrival of the railroad in 1878 brought new settlers, businesses, and opportunities to the once isolated community. Mr. Richardson, growing too frail to manage even the reduced size of the R, sold the remainder of his ranch to Henry and 3 other local ranchers, dividing his once vast holdings into manageable parcels. Through it all, Henry and Sophia's partnership deepened. The love that had blossomed so quickly in those early days matured into something enduring and essential, like the roots of the cottonwood trees that lined Sunset Creek, weather-beaten at times, but drawing strength from depths unseen. On the 5th anniversary of their wedding, Henry arranged a special surprise for Sophia. After the children were asleep, he led her outside to where 2 horses waited, saddled and ready. "What's this?" Sophia asked, intrigued. "Do you trust me?" Henry replied with a smile. "With my life," she answered without hesitation. They rode in the moonlight across the familiar contours of their land, eventually cresting a small hill that overlooked the valley where their home nestled. Henry had prepared a simple picnic, a bottle of wine, bread, cheese, and the apple pie that was Sophia's specialty. "Happy anniversary, my love," he said as they settled on the blanket he had spread earlier. Sophia leaned over to kiss him, still marveling at how the simple touch of his lips could stir her heart after all this time. "It's beautiful up here. Though I hate to think what Mrs. Peterson would say about us abandoning our children to go gallivanting in the moonlight." Henry chuckled. Mrs. Peterson, a widow who lived in a small cabin on their property, often helped with the children and had readily agreed to stay the night. "I believe her exact words were, 'About time you 2 had an evening to yourselves.'" They ate and drank, reminiscing about the years they had shared and the changes they had witnessed. As the moon climbed higher in the sky, Henry grew quieter, a contemplative expression on his face. "What are you thinking?" Sophia asked, recognizing the look. "About that first evening," he replied. "When I saw you walking alone at sunset and offered to accompany you." Sophia smiled at the memory. "You said you'd walk with me until the sun rises?" "I did." Henry took her hand, his expression earnest. "And I've tried to keep that promise every day since, to walk beside you through whatever darkness comes our way." "You have," Sophia assured him, squeezing his hand. "Even when the winter of '77 nearly buried us in snow, even when we lost that first calf crop to disease, even when Hannah had the fever so bad we thought we might lose her." The shared memories, both painful and joyful, hung between them in the night air, testaments to the life they had built together. "I have something for you," Henry said, reaching into his pocket. He withdrew a small velvet pouch and placed it in Sophia's palm. Inside, she found a delicate gold locket. When she opened it, she discovered a tiny portrait of their children on one side and a lock of Henry's hair on the other. "Henry, it's beautiful," she whispered, deeply touched by the thoughtful gift. "Look on the back," he urged. Sophia turned the locket over and read the inscription engraved in the gold. "Until the sun rises and long after." Tears welled in her eyes as Henry took the locket from her hands and fastened it around her neck. "I love you, Sophia Blackwood. More today than yesterday, and not as much as I will tomorrow." Under the vast starry sky, with the land they had tamed spreading out below them and the home they had built together waiting in the distance, They renewed the promises they had made 5 years earlier in the Willow Creek church. This time, there were no witnesses except the moon and stars, no music except the night winds across the prairie, but the vows were no less sacred for their simplicity. As they lay back on the blanket, Sophia's head resting on Henry's chest and his arms secure around her, she reflected on the journey that had brought them to this moment. From a chance meeting on a dusty road to building a life and family together, they had faced each challenge united. The frontier had tested them, as it tested all who sought to make their lives upon it, but together they had not merely survived, they had flourished. "What do you think the next 5 years will bring?" Sophia asked, tracing patterns on Henry's chest with her fingertip. Henry considered the question, his gaze on the stars above. "More children, perhaps. A bigger herd. Hannah starting school." He turned to look into her eyes. "But the most important things won't change. You and me, walking side by side, no matter what comes." As they rode home in the pre-dawn light, the eastern sky beginning to pale with the promise of a new day, Sophia was struck by how perfectly Henry's promise had been fulfilled. He had indeed walked with her until the sun rose and continued walking with her through 5 years of sunrises and sunsets, through storms and clear skies alike. When they crested the final hill and their home came into view, the sturdy cabin with smoke already rising from the chimney where Mrs. Peterson had started the morning fire, the barn and corrals where their livelihood was secured, the garden where their food grew, Sophia felt a profound sense of gratitude for the life they had created together. "Race you home?" Henry suggested with a boyish grin that reminded her of the day they had first met. Sophia laughed, the sound carrying across the open land. "You're on, Cowboy." They urged their horses forward, riding side by side toward the home and family that awaited them, their laughter mingling with the morning breeze as the sun broke over the horizon, bathing their world in golden light, a fitting symbol for the life they had built from that first sunset meeting on a lonely frontier road. In the years that followed, Sunset Creek Ranch prospered and expanded. Henry's reputation as a cattleman grew throughout the territory, and his innovative breeding techniques attracted buyers from as far away as Chicago. Sophia, though no longer teaching formally, became known for her dedication to education, establishing a small library in their home that served not only their growing family but the surrounding community as well. Their family expanded too, first with the arrival of twin daughters Elizabeth and Emily in 1881, and later with their youngest son James in 1883. The Blackwood children grew up learning both the practical skills of ranch life and the academic knowledge their mother valued so highly. It was a balanced upbringing that prepared them well for the changing world of the American West. Willow Creek transformed from a frontier outpost to a proper town with a mayor, a town council, on which Henry served for several terms, a new 2-story schoolhouse, and even a small college that opened in 1890. The wilderness that had once threatened was gradually tamed, though never entirely. Nature in the West always retained its capacity to challenge human endeavors with drought, blizzard, and storm. Through it all, Henry and Sophia's partnership remained the bedrock of their existence. They weathered the hardships and celebrated the triumphs together, their love deepening with each passing year. The promise made that first evening to walk together until the sun rises extended into decades of sunrises and sunsets, each one a testament to the life they had built from that chance encounter on a dusty road. On their 30th wedding anniversary, with their children grown and the ranch thriving under the joint management of Henry and their sons, they returned to the hill where they had celebrated their 5th anniversary. Though their hair had grayed and their faces showed the lines of years lived fully in sun and wind, the love between them remained as vibrant as ever. As they watched the sunset together, Henry's arm around Sophia's shoulders just as it had been that first evening so many years ago, he turned to her with the same admiration in his eyes that he had shown when she was a young schoolteacher. "Do you remember what I said to you that day we met?" he asked, his voice still strong despite the passing years. Sophia smiled, her hand finding his. "You said you'd walk with me until the sun rises." "Best promise I ever made," Henry replied, pulling her close. "And I intend to keep it for as many sunrises as we have left." As the stars appeared one by one in the darkening sky, They remained on their hillside, two figures silhouetted against the vastness of the western night, a testament to a love that had begun with a simple offer of protection and grown into a lifetime of shared dreams, challenges overcome, and a family raised in the shadow of the setting sun and the promise of each new dawn.